The following is not legal advice. Before taking any action in your own self-defense, be fully aware of the laws that apply in your state. Why would you ever need a magazine that could hold more than 20 bullets? Why would you need 30 bullets or even up to 100? And those are actual examples that have been cited by the likes of President Barack Obama, more recently President Joe Biden. Hillary Clinton talked about those numbers when she was running for president back in 2016. On the left, when you're dealing with the gun control argument, frequently you hear some variation of this mic drop, as they regard it, where they say, why would you possibly ever need to have so many bullets in your gun? And it's really kind of astounding to consider the fact that they think that this is a persuasive argument. It really indicates the lack of familiarity that they have, not just with firearms as a category, but crime as a category. If you've never been confronted with a scenario where seconds counted in order to defend yourself, your family, your property, then I can see why you couldn't envision a scenario where you would need more than 7 bullets. But the fact of the matter is, increasingly we are seeing scenarios where an individual who is the victim of a crime, the only way they could potentially tip the balance in their favor is if they're packing something that has, shall we say, a lot of heat. Here's an example we can take a look at that was recently posted to Twitter. So this was some CCTV footage from an unknown retail location. They appear to be closed. The doors are locked. This video is dated 6/12, so the 12th of June of this year, less than a week ago. This actually happened. This is a real world example. Let's take a look. All right, so that entire video is 41 seconds long. 41 seconds. In 41 seconds, the gentleman in that video, the innocent victim, goes from an ordinary day, just like any other day, to being unexpectedly assaulted by 20 or so disguised, hooded individuals, bashing in the windows of the closed door, bashing in the glass, assaulting him personally, robbing him, and then moving on to the interior of the retail location. Now, very obviously, why are they doing that in that way? Why get 20 of your friends, put on disguises, and rush them all at once? Well, the answer is obvious, right? The intention is twofold. One, to overwhelm the victim, who in this case is this guy and whoever else might be inside. Certainly the owner of the establishment is being victimized here. And also, of course, to overwhelm law enforcement. Law enforcement can't effectively respond to an attack like this. There's no time to even communicate. Like, the guy doesn't have time to call 911 in response to what he's seeing here. And even if he calls after the fact, by time law enforcement arrives, likely these guys are going to be gone. They're going to be scattered to the wind. They're all dressed alike. They're running in 20 different directions. That's the point, right? The whole point is overwhelm the victim and overwhelm the system. That's why they're doing what they're doing. And we're seeing these types of attacks in increasing frequency, coordinated for exactly that purpose, which is to overwhelm law and order and to terrorize the citizenry. So how do you tip the scales? Well, there's really only one way that you can tip the scales back in favor of law and order and back in favor of the innocent victims in these types of situations. And that is to adjust the law to enable untethered self-defense. And what I mean by untethered self-defense is the ability to act rationally in your self-defense no matter how violent it looks. And so in this case, you've got 20 guys rushing the door. You got 20 guys rushing the door, you should be able to open fire on that crowd. Now, under different circumstances, under most circumstances, indiscriminate fire into a crowd would be a very, very bad idea and would certainly be a criminal act. But in this case, it's very obvious and very rational to assume that everyone who is participating in this rushing of the door and is dressed alike and is bashing in your windows, they are all criminal actors. Every single one of them, obviously. And so the only way to deter that, the only way to push back against it, is to deploy lethal force. And why lethal force? Well, isn't it just property? These are the types of arguments that you'll hear from the left. Oh, it's just property. All they're doing is breaking windows, vandalizing, taking stuff. Well, there's a couple of different arguments against that. One, how do you know? How do you know they're not coming in there to murder you? You don't know that. And rationally, you ought to be able to assume under the law that if somebody is willing to rush you in broad daylight and take furniture and objects to break down the windows and bust through the doors and come at you, rationally, you ought to be able, under fear of your life, to assume that you are being assaulted with lethal force and respond in kind. But secondarily, this diminishment of the value of property is something that we really need to rethink. Property is not some useless, valueless, trivial thing that we can dismiss as not being important. What property represents is the frozen form of your life. You expended the energy of your life in order to acquire your property. And this attitude of, oh, well, you can just replace it, or, oh, you have insurance. No. Once property is destroyed, it is destroyed. And yes, you can replace it at your expense. You can replace it at the expense of further expending your life in order to resecure it, in order to replace it. And if you're going to say that it's okay for a criminal to deface, destroy, or steal your property without consequence, then basically what you're doing is, in retrospect, you're making a partial slave out of the victim. Because, let's put it this way, if the same effect was acquired through different means, and the means were that the assailant were to capture the person and then make them work the equivalent amount that it took in order to obtain or create that property, that would be universally recognized as a crime, as something that warranted a high degree of punishment. You've kidnapped somebody, you've compelled them into labor, you've enslaved them, basically. Wrongful imprisonment, however the legal terms pan out. In effect, when somebody steals from you, that is what they are doing. They're just doing it on the opposite end of the creation process. The product has already been created and they're taking it from you. So all of the little did you know when you were expending your life in order to obtain that property, you weren't actually working for yourself, you were working for them. You were working for your assailant who's taking it from you. And so we need to think of property crime much more seriously than we currently do as a society. The other angle on this that I hear people talk about is they try to twist around the pro-life argument and say, well, you guys are pro-life. Why do you casually dismiss the value of the lives of these 20 assailants who are bashing in a retail location and running into it to take stuff? And the fact of the matter is, I'm not the one. This guy is not the one. Any potential victim who defends themselves in a scenario like this are not the ones who are devaluing the lives of the assailants. The assailants are the ones who are devaluing their own lives. When you make the decision to trespass upon another, to encroach upon another, to assail another, you are discounting the value of your own life, and you are putting others in the horrific position of having to potentially take your life in their own self-defense. The blame for that, the fault for that, lies entirely on the assailant. This is the way we need to start thinking about crime. It's the way we did think about crime until about 5 minutes ago. Suddenly we have this newfangled idea that it's deeply important to uphold the rights of the criminal, the rights that we imagine, the rights that we conjure, the rights that don't actually exist, and to completely dismiss law and order as such and the rights of victims. No more.